Campaign finance reports that were filed at the Albuquerque City Clerk's office last week showed that the race to be the next Duke City mayor has topped $2 million. Candidates have either raised or otherwise accumulated about $100,000 over that $2 million mark since the first of the year. Now, some candidates have loaned themselves their own campaign, and one candidate is publicly financed, but $2 million is still a lot of money. With me to discuss the topic of money in this mayor's race and other news of the week are Tom Garrity from the Garrity Group PR, Laura Sanchez-Rivey, she's an attorney at Cuddy & McCarthy LLP, Vicki Harrison's here from Common Cause New Mexico, and former New Mexico State Senator Mark Boitano joins us. Mark, all that money, is this just what it costs to run a campaign these days? Is this an anomaly to you? Or does this feel like it's on track to a normal? Have we reached a new normal now for mayoral races here in Albuquerque?
Well, I think, the amount of money is an indication of the viable candidates we have. It's not, so you've got 4 or 5 people that are raising significant amounts of money.
Right.
So the number looks big, but I don't know that the amounts candidates are raising are any different than what we've seen in the past. Mm-hmm. And it's an indication of the bigger problem of the issues facing the city.
Right.
Crime and the whole art issue and what's happening with jobs and the homeless and all this. So we have a lot of problems. People are unhappy, and the level of unhappiness among voters in Albuquerque right now is at a level I haven't seen in decades. Mm-hmm. So we have 4 or 5 pretty good candidates that have stepped up. So. And they're raising significant amounts of money. I think that's a good thing. What's interesting to me is the strategies, the difference in strategies, and the fact that each of them comes from a different base. You have Lewis on the west side, you got Keller in the International District, Johnson up in the Heights, and Brian Colon, who has a statewide base and maybe not much name recognition among ordinary voters in Albuquerque. But each has a different strategy. Keller's got a grassroots strategy. Mm-hmm. Lewis has a social media strategy. Ricardo Chavez has a lot of money, and he hasn't really done much.
Right.
He's kind of a quiet guy. I don't know if you've met him, but he's starting to do some mailings. So it'll be interesting to see which strategy works and what the outcomes are.
That's right. Laura, interestingly, Brian Colon was mentioned. He's the clear frontrunner on the amount of money he's raised. In fact, with money that's available that they have in the bank, literally, he's sitting at $517,340, far and away beyond. What do you attribute that to? What makes his fundraising so robust at this point?
Well, he has a lot of connections with a lot of businesses. I think if you look at the names on there, it's a who's who of people he's had business relationships with. So I think that's where that comes from. Mm-hmm. He's raised money for a number of different causes and has been involved in that. So that doesn't surprise me. But what does surprise me somewhat is how much money he has on hand, which tells me he hasn't really spent that money in consulting or any other areas. So it doesn't look like a fully staffed campaign from my perspective.
Gotcha.
And the money race is one indication, but it isn't an indication of moving people to the polls.
Okay.
And that's what's going to count, is how many, this is obviously a low voter turnout election. It's going to be tough to motivate people to go to the polls in the first place. It's not like a presidential where people are motivated, by national issues. It's not a statewide where people are motivated by, the next gubernatorial race, what happens at the state legislature. This is a very low voter turnout race. And so it doesn't matter how much money you have or how much you have in the bank if you're not actually able to connect with the voter and get them to actually show up at the polls for you. So with this many people running, it's really important to focus in on whoever those people are. They're going to actually show up to vote. And I think a grassroots campaign is really important. I think, the social media campaign is an interesting one, although it doesn't connect with what traditionally is your traditional voter in these kinds of races, which are 50 plus.
That's right.
These are folks that are still influenced by TV, media, media buys, and that maybe even radio in some respects. And so you want to look at, how are you actually connecting with that voter? Mm-hmm. Interestingly, and you mentioned Ricardo Chavez, he's the only one I've seen any mail from so far. I didn't even know he was in the race until I received a mail piece from him.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Nobody else has put mail out there yet. And so that's going to be, I think, another issue, another indication. And we're going to see a lot of that. But if you spend any time going to these political events, which unfortunately I end up doing more than I wish to, you see a lot of these people in the same places, which tells me that they're bumping into the same group of people. Mm-hmm. And that's more of sort of a show of, yes, I'm active, I'm out there, I want this. Mm-hmm. But is it really connecting to the same group of people that have already maybe made up their mind, picked a camp, is it really connecting with the base of the vote of the voters out there? And I don't know that that's the case. So we'll see how they actually start spending that money.
That
That's
makes
what's going to
sense.
make a difference.
Interesting there, Vic. One another interesting point is Tim Keller has 232,446 in the bank, but he chose to take public financing.
Right.
And I'm curious in the strategery of these things, if he might have made, I don't want to say a mistake, but there was another choice there. If he chose to chase money in the free market, so to speak, the way Brian Colon has, might he be in a better financial position? What do you think of that?
Well, obviously, the public financing system in Albuquerque has been very successful since it was put in place in 2005. We've had both Republicans, Democrats use it. The problem is that the Supreme Court struck down part of that back in 2011. And we've been trying to fix it to be able to, when you get to these reports and you see that the publicly financed candidates are making so much more money, the old system would trigger additional funds for a publicly financed candidate.
That's right.
From what I've heard, Tim Keller is just a true believer in public financing. And he is, the reason we say public financing is important is because you don't spend 5 hours a day calling rich people trying to raise money.
Right.
You are actually out in the field. And in fact, I just talked to a congressman from a different state recently, and he brought up another point about the dialing for dollars, because we get frustrated with the 5 hours a day, you have to do this because you're not working on policy. But then he said, well, think about it though, Vicki. It goes even further than that. If I spend 5 hours a day calling people who can afford the top contribution, no matter where I come from, after a few months, all I'm hearing are rich people problems. So I really think that's what the problem in my district is, because that's who I'm talking to over and over and over again. And so, of course, I'm cheering for anybody who's taking public financing. But we don't have to worry about any sorts of conflicts of interest with Common Cause, because I don't even live in the city.
There you go. Well, and interestingly, Tom, Mr. Keller has a group now, an outside group that's raising money for him now, because he, in essence, is capped. He can't, on his own, raise more than that. And so, again, in the strategery of things, I'm wondering if Mr. Colon has a position where he can spend down his opponents earlier than they would like to spend money, if you see what I mean. You mentioned, Laura mentioned, there's only one person doing mailers out there, but if Brian Colon decided to really start getting out there and putting some serious money out there, it's tough to stand pat and let somebody just race to the distance. What do you make of that idea?
Well, when these numbers are released, it always provides some interesting fodder for all of us around the table, obviously. But
Right.
when you look at Brian Colon with in excess of $500,000 in the bank, and Tim Keller with $232,000 in the bank, it's easy to make that assumption of, okay, it's Colon's to lose. Well, the election is still 2.5 months away, and there's 40%, according to at least one poll, 40% of registered voters who really haven't made up their mind yet. So it's really anybody's game. I think that, to say that Mr. Colon has an advantage right now would be accurate from a bankroll perspective, but I don't think he has the advantage from the perspective of the overall campaign. I think it's the Democrats' race to lose, even though it's a nonpartisan race. Sure. But when you have Tim Keller in the race, and public financing restricts in one area, but it frees up in a lot of others. In that, one, every person who signs your voter roll, is financially invested in that particular campaign. That's huge, because they're going to want to follow through on that investment. Two is that it provides the option to leverage PACs and other outside entities. And so, I think that's the second chapter that we're going to be seeing is what type of involvement will the plumbers, pipe fitters have?
Right.
What type of involvement will the Teachers Association have? So you have all of these, it's like chapter one, done. Now let's head on to chapter
And
two.
those asks are being made right now.
Absolutely.
Right now. Laura, we've had plenty of insiders out there who are been able to raise money over the years that have not pulled it off at the polls. So, touching on Tom's point there, at some point it's going to have to be about message, your vision for this city, for the future. Are you hearing anything worthy, not necessarily Brian Colon, but others as well? What are you hearing out there for people beyond crime and all the usual stuff?
Well, I mean, I have a preference in this race. I live in the city, so my preference is Tim Keller. So that resonates. And I was a Dina supporter prior until Dina dropped out. I think he is giving it a much more specific, people-focused, city-focused message. Right. Of the rest of them that are in there, the other one that resonates with me in terms of talking about real issues is Dan Lewis, actually, because I think he in his position as city council, and he was, before I got redistricted, I was in his district. They have a very good constituent services program, and they really connect with the local, at the local level, talking to people, doing the basics that city council and the city should do. Delivery of services, garbage, things as basically as a garbage can. We had a garbage can issue at our home, in our neighborhood, and they took care of it.
People remember stuff like that.
Local stuff like that, and I think that gives him
Right.
an advantage because he's in that
Absolutely.
position. So for me, I really think that, the other thing as a political insider of sorts, and actually I wanted to clarify something that you
Please.
said earlier, is
Yeah.
Tim Keller raising money and then a group raising money for him. It's actually an independent expenditure campaign.
Right.
They're not raising money for him, they're raising money to spend, as that committee, not for him.
That's a
So
key
I just want
distinction. Thank
to
you
make
for
sure,
that.
because otherwise it sounds like it's just an arm raising money for his campaign. They're
That's
actually
right.
supposed to be separate.
Right.
And so in any event, but I do think that, this is when you start to look, we're really close actually in terms of an election. I know it seems like a very far away, but it's October. So we're looking at just a few months. And so now is really, okay, how are you actually going to spend that money?
Right.
And what's interesting is that if you look at the Democratic campaign committees or strategists out there, most of them are already tied up. They're either tied up with some of the gubernatorial races, the 7 congressional races we've got going on. But there's only 1 or 2 that are really focused on the local level at the city council. And so even when you look at somebody with a war chest of $500,000, if the premier, consulting agency is already with Tim Keller, you got to wonder who's actually professionally assisting this person, because, and I think that's where you're going to start to see their filing reports to see who are they actually paying for work.
Right. That's right. Good point. Let's finish with Senator. Again, a lot of these things, I appreciate Laura's point about the trash barrel thing.
Right.
That's what gets stuff done in this
right.
world, and people remember that kind of thing.
Right.
So, again, is this an outsider, however, cycle? Is this a cycle where someone's could possibly just break through with a better message than all the top money raisers? You know what I mean? Because people, like you said before, they're frustrated, they're angry. We're in a different place right now.
Yeah. I think that's always the case. My impression is that it's the message, the money, and the candidate themselves.
Okay.
And I know 4 or 5 of the candidates, and I serve with Tim Keller. We worked on legislation. You meet him; he's very impressive. You meet Dan Lewis, he's very impressive. I've worked with Wayne Johnson, he's impressive. I know Brian Cullen a little bit, he's impressive. So they've got that going for them. I remember Rick Homans many years ago had a lot of money, but people didn't know him. They hadn't pressed the flesh.
The old
with him.
publisher of the business paper here.
Right,
and other
right.
things.
So he had a lot of money, and we were thinking, hey, this money is going to make a difference, but it didn't because people didn't know him personally. So Laura's point, I think, is really, really important. I mean, the reality is 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4 voters is going to vote in this election. And if you're on the airwaves, who are you targeting? I mean, is it the 1 in 5 that will vote or not? So grassroots politics is really going to make a difference, I think. And, Keller has a grassroots strategy.
Ground
Some of
game.
the other candidates do. And it's going to be all about
time for
you've
shoe
met
leather.
and who
That's
can
right.
get the voters out.
That's right, exactly right. I'll have to end it there. Now, when we come back to the line, we'll talk about whether the number of New Mexico's publicly funded colleges and universities, 31, is just too many to sustain.